little fox.
Gulliver's Travels, Chapter 1, Shipwrecked. In 1674, I was born on my father's small estate in Nottinghamshire, England.
"What a fine, strong boy,"
said my father.
"I think he will be a clever and good man like his grandfather."
I agree,
said my mother.
Let's name him Lemuel after your father.
My childhood was very happy. I liked going to school and learning new things, but I often used to daydream about going to sea. One day, Father asked,
"Lemuel, have you thought about your future? I think you would be a good doctor."
I wanted to please him, so I said, "Yes, Father, I'll go to Cambridge University and study medicine." But as I spoke, I was thinking, at university, I can also learn things that will be useful to a sailor. After several years of study, I became a doctor. Not long after, I asked my sweetheart, Mary, to marry me.
Lemuel,
She replied.
I would be very happy to marry you.
Before long, we had children, a boy and a girl. They gave us great joy. I enjoyed being a doctor for the first few years, but then I became bored, and ideas of travel filled my mind. I imagined wandering to far-off places and seeing wonderful new things. "Mary," I said one day, "I need more adventure in my life. The captain of a ship about to sail has offered me a job as the ship's doctor."
Oh dear,
Mary replied.
the children and I will miss you very much, and I'll worry about you. When will you come back?
"I don't know how long the journey will take," I told her, "but I promise I will return. And when I do, I'll tell you and the children all about my adventures." So in 1699, I set sail on the Antelope from Bristol. That city is a large and very old port in the southwest of England. From the dock, Mary called out,
Goodbye, and please be careful. Come back to us soon.
The children waved to me and I waved back. The captain was a good man and had sailed a great deal. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Gulliver," he said. "First we'll be sailing down the Atlantic Ocean and around the coast of Africa. Then we'll sail through the Indian Ocean to the South Seas." Our journey went well until one morning, somewhere near Tasmania, in the South Pacific Ocean. "I don't like the look of those clouds," the captain said. "I think a storm is coming." Within an hour, a violent storm began. The sea rose in great, angry waves, much taller than the Antelope. The wind, now as strong as a hurricane, made a terrible sound. "The wind is blowing the ship off course," shouted the captain. "Look out!" Suddenly, with a loud crack, the Antelope hit some rocks and broke in half. The sailors fell into the sea. Many of them could not swim. The ship sank quickly, and I suppose everyone but me drowned. I am an excellent swimmer and swam with all my strength. My life depended on it. But after a while, I was too tired to swim anymore. Just as I was thinking, "I'm going to die too!" my feet touched the ocean floor. Slowly I struggled out of the sea. There were no signs of people on the beach and no houses. I could barely walk, so I lay down on the sand. Within minutes, I fell into a deep sleep. Gulliver's Travels, Chapter 2, Prisoner in Lilliput. When I woke up the next morning, I couldn't move. I must still be tired from all that swimming, I thought. But soon I discovered why I couldn't move. My body, arms, and legs were tied to the ground. Even my hair, which was long and thick, was tied down. I couldn't even move my head. How strange, I said to myself. I must be dreaming. The sun grew hot and shone in my eyes. All I could see was the sky. Soon I felt something crawling on my left leg. It must be a bug, I thought. It moved up my body almost to my chin. I looked down and, to my great surprise, saw a tiny man standing on my chest. He was about as big as my thumb, no more than 15 centimeters tall. In his hands, he held a bow and arrows. I felt many more little men crawling over me. In astonishment, I shouted very loudly, "Get off me, you insects!" They all jumped in alarm and screamed in terror. Some of the little men fell right off my body. I tried to loosen the ropes that held me down. Although the ropes were very thin, like thread, there were hundreds of them. Finally, I was able to free my left arm. The tiny men began to shoot arrows at me. Several arrows landed on my hand. Others hit my face and chest. "Stop that! It hurts!" I cried out. I decided to lie still and see what would happen next. The little people gradually became brave and came near me. They built a platform beside my head. One of them, an official of some kind, climbed onto the platform. He started speaking to me, but his language was not like any language I had heard before. The little men seemed friendly now. "I'm so hungry," I said, but they didn't understand me. With my free hand, I used signs to ask for food. The men brought me baskets of many different foods. I also drank 2 barrels of wine. Another official spoke to me, making signs with his hands as he talked. I understood that they were going to take me to another place. I fell asleep again. Later, I found out that the wine had contained something to make me sleep. I also learned about the island and what had happened while I slept. The island was called Lilliput. Its king lived in a castle in Mildendo, the capital city, which had high walls around it. The people made a huge cart and put me on it when I was asleep. I found out that it took 900 men to lift me onto the cart. 1,500 Lilliputian horses were needed to pull it. When we arrived near the city, the guards attached many chains to my ankle. Then, they cut the ropes that tied me down. At last, I was able to stand up and stretch. But because of the chains, I could not move about much. We were near a very large building just outside the gates of Mildendo. Well, I thought, it seems this building is to be my home. It was big enough for me to crawl into and lie down inside it. From outside my new home, I had a good view of the countryside. The fields were tiny, like small flower beds in my garden in England. Even the tallest trees were only about 2 meters high. Lilliput was a beautiful place, and everything in it was unbelievably tiny. Gulliver's Travels, Chapter 3, Visits from the King. One day, the king and queen came to visit me. Soon, a large, noisy crowd gathered, because people were very curious about me. Some people pushed others out of the way to get a better look. They wanted to see me and hear what the king said to me. The king was taller than most Lilliputians and moved gracefully. He and the queen wore magnificent clothes. I lay down on my side so that the king and I could observe each other more easily. He spoke to me for a long time, but I couldn't understand his words. Then, the king and queen returned to the palace. He left his guards to watch me and control the crowd. Some men in the crowd shouted and shot arrows at me. The chief guard ordered 6 of them to be caught and tied up. To punish them, the guard gave them to me. "Yum! You'll make a delicious snack," I said. I put 5 of the troublemakers in my pocket and picked up the 6th man between my finger and thumb. He struggled, and I moved my hand toward my mouth. He screamed. I took out my pocket knife and he thought I was going to cut him up. Instead, I cut the strings that he was tied with and put the man carefully on the ground. Then I took the other man out of my pocket. "Don't ever shoot at me again," I said as I set them free. Soon everyone in Lilliput knew about me, but people had trouble pronouncing my name. To make things easy, they called me Enormous One in their language. The king ordered his best scholars to teach me the Lilliputian language. I learn languages easily because I'm interested in people from other countries. In about 3 weeks, I knew enough Lilliputian to talk with the king. He came to visit me often. Each time, I asked him the same thing. "Please, Your Majesty, take the chains off my ankle."
"First, I must consult with my advisors,"
the king replied.
"Also, you must show my officers what is in your pockets."
"Your officers may inspect all my possessions," I said. I took everything out of my pockets, and the officers examined my things with great interest. Later, I read the report they wrote about my things. My handkerchief and my pocket knife were noted in the report. But the most interesting thing, the report said, is the large shiny engine. It makes a sound again and again. The Enormous One often looks at this engine. Lilliput has no clocks, so the officers didn't know what my gold watch was for. The Enormous One has another metal thing, continued the report. It is bent, and part of it is a long tube. My gun had been discovered.
"What is this thing for?"
asked the king. "I will show you, but it will make a loud noise," I explained. "Order your people to move away from that tree. I don't want anyone to get hurt." I pointed my gun at the tree and fired. Many people fell down or ran away or hid. The noise terrified everyone, including the king, but he calmed down quickly.
"You may keep your things,"
he told me.
"but I will keep the metal one that makes the big noise."
"It is my gift to you," I said. "Please be very careful with it and keep it locked up." Gulliver's Travels, Chapter 4. Gulliver Goes Free. I hoped to be set free one day, so I was nice to the Lilliputians. Gradually, they lost their fear of me. Sometimes the children even played hide and seek in my hair. One day, the king said to me,
"I invite you to attend an important performance. It is a contest called rope dancing. Come with me."
For this contest, a thin rope was tied between two poles very high above the ground. The people who wanted the best jobs had to dance on this rope. Each dancer tried to jump higher than the others. I had never seen such a dangerous sport. "Your Majesty," I said, "many dancers must fall and be hurt or killed."
"Yes,"
he replied.
"Some break their arms or legs, and several have broken their necks. But I give the most important jobs in my kingdom to the men who are not afraid and jump the highest. These brave men will work hard for Lilliput."
What a strange way to choose who will work for the country, I thought. Then, as the king watched, I attached each corner of my handkerchief to a strong stick. I pushed the 4 sticks into the ground. My handkerchief was now under the rope, but above the ground. "Your Majesty," I said, "any dancer who falls will now land on my handkerchief and not get hurt."
"You are wise, Enormous One,"
said the king.
"I am pleased with your invention."
His family and many other people watched the rope dancing. "Would you and the queen like to see better?" I asked the king. I gently put them on my hand and held it beside the rope. They had a good view of the dancers. One very skilled performer turned several cartwheels on the rope. Then he held onto the rope and flipped his body right over it. The king and queen clapped loudly and cheered. Later, the king told me that he made this man one of his chief advisors. The king and I met often. He seemed to enjoy our conversations. One day, I said again, "Your Majesty, please set me free." This time he answered,
I have talked to my advisors. We agree that you have been good to our people. I will set you free if you make 6 promises.
"What must I promise?" I asked.
You must help my country in war and peace.
Said the king. "I promise," I said.
Before you visit the capital,
Continued the king.
you must give 2 hours warning. Then my people can get out of the streets.
I promise.
You must not step on my people or their animals.
I promise.
You must carry important messages for me quickly to anywhere in Lilliput.
I promise,
Also,
said the king.
you must help my workers carry heavy objects.
I promise,
The last promise
said the king.
is this: you must not leave the kingdom without my permission. If you do so, I will be angry.
I promise that too, I told the king.
Then you may have your freedom.
He said.
Unchain the enormous one.
The king ordered his men.
Now you can travel throughout Lilliput.
He said. Thank you, Your Majesty, I said. I would like to see more of your country.
When you come to the capital city, you may visit my palace.
The king said.
I'm sure you will find it the most beautiful you have ever seen.
Gullivers Travels, Chapter 5, A Visit to Mildendo. On my first day of freedom, I went into the capital city, Mildendo. I stepped over the city walls and walked through the streets. Most of the houses in Mildendo had 3 to 5 stories. They were painted in many bright colors, and some had unusual patterns painted on them. People watched me curiously from every window. The city was a square, with 2 main streets that crossed in the middle of the city. These 2 streets divided Mildendo into quarters. The main streets were just wide enough for me to walk down. I could not go into the smaller streets, though, because my feet were too big, and those streets were too narrow. Because the Lilliputians are so small, I had to walk very carefully so as not to step on anyone. "Hello," I said to people as I passed them. Some people waved. A man in a blue coat called out,
Welcome to Mildendo.
"This is the most crowded city I've ever seen," I said to him.
500,000 people live here.
He replied almost proudly. The king's palace was in the center of the city, surrounded by a high, thick wall. I climbed over the wall and lay down on the ground. From there, I could see into the palace rooms. Everything in the palace was beautiful, just as the king had said. In one room, I saw the queen talking with some ladies. When she saw me, she came to the window.
"Enormous one,"
She said.
"welcome to our fair city. You may kiss my hand."
Her hand was smaller than the nail of my little finger. "I am honored to see you, Your Majesty," I replied. "Your palace is magnificent. In all my travels, I have never seen a better palace." I kissed her tiny hand very carefully. The queen and I talked for a little while. All things in Lilliput, the people, the birds, the animals, the plants and trees, are tiny. The people would fit nicely into my daughter's dollhouse. Even the tallest trees on the island are only a little taller than I am. When I first arrived, I was surprised at the smallness of everything. After a few weeks, though, I got used to it. Day by day, I learned more about the customs of Lilliput. In Lilliput, as in England, a person who does something bad is punished. The king of Lilliput, however, also rewards good people. If they obey all laws for 6 years, he gives them money.
What an interesting idea.
I said to myself.
The King of England does not reward people for good behavior. His people might behave better if he did.
One day, a visitor came to see me.
My name is Reldresal,
He said.
I am the king's chief assistant. I help him make decisions and take care of his important business.
I am very happy to meet you, sir.
I said to Reldresal.
Please thank His Majesty for giving me my freedom. Now I can explore your lovely island.
The king sets you free
Explained my new friend.
because he needs your help. Lilliput is in danger.
What kind of danger?
I asked.
That is a long story.
Reldresal replied.
Let me tell you a little of the history of Lilliput.
Little Fox.